It's unfulfilled motivations, expectations, and promises. And then one of the quotes was, be careful what you wish for. So essentially, you're taking people who have stars in their eyes, a lot of ambition and motivation to go on a TV show, whether it be because they're looking for a really fun experience, just like, a check mark off the bucket list, doing something unique, an adventure, or maybe even looking for fame. Some people are even looking for their businesses to take off and see that
Yes.
as a way to do that too. And so you've got these people with really high hopes, and in some instances, people who are coming from very vulnerable backgrounds, like
Are you going through life blind? This is Eyes Wide Open with Nick Thompson. On this podcast, we share knowledge and stories that build human connection while elevating stigmatized societal issues such as mental health, holistic wellness, culture, free speech, and more, all to ensure we show up in the world with our eyes wide open. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to this episode of Eyes Wide Open. Our guest today is Christine Chapais. Christine is a licensed social worker, certified school social worker, and an assistant professor at Rutgers School of Social Work. She is also the author of the newly published research paper titled Reality Check, a qualitative study of mental well-being among participants, which examines reality TV participants' perceptions of their mental well-being during and after their involvement in reality TV shows. And then in full transparency, I think I'm allowed to say this, but I participated in this study, which is how I met you and know of the paper, but I don't know any of the other participants. So I just want to clear that up out of the way, or maybe I do know them and I just don't know who they are. But,
right.
Just full transparency for the audience. I participated in this study and I think there were 15 total. Is that right?
That's
15
correct.
total?
Yep.
Okay, great. So we're going to talk about your study and your research, and we'll talk about this paper and all the things that you learned and kind of what your takeaways are and some of the things that you think should be adjusted in the industry to help with participants. But before we get into the meat and potatoes, as they like to say, why don't you answer my favorite question? And that question is, what did you want to be when you were growing up? And then how did that lead you to the work that you do now?
And I think that's an awesome question because I think it's twofold and it leans into why this research study interested me. Growing up, I loved entertainment. I like to sing. I like to act. I like to dance, all of the performing arts. And so that's always something that I wanted to do, paired with just always caring a whole lot about people and wanting to do something where I get to help people. I remember as early as 8 years old, going into AOL chat rooms and asking people if they needed a friend to talk to. And I swear I have a good mother. She did pay attention to me and made sure that I didn't make friends with strangers. But I guess that's a pretty young age to start wanting to help others. But I continued to do the performing arts and I absolutely loved expressing myself through, entertainment. And I've always said that the performing arts and social worker, any sort of caring profession, has the theme of being really in touch with your emotions, and being able to identify other people and their emotions and what their needs might be. So I feel like they somehow do intertwine in a way, if that makes sense.
No, it actually does. I'd never thought of that before, but if you're going to be any kind of performer, you have to be in touch with maybe not all of your emotions, but in touch with emotions so that you can know how to express them in a performance.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. I never thought of that before. That's really interesting.
Maybe another research study.
Yeah. And also, where were you when I was going through it at 13 years old on AOL Instant Messenger and in chat rooms and needing a friend? And it was like everyone was mean.
Right, exactly. Why are you bullying me? Yeah,
exactly.
And that's it. Disinhibition. It's something. It's like another thing that has been studied about how people interact online. When people have anonymity on their side, they tend to just speak differently to others, treat them differently than they might when they're in person. I kind of think of it like fence rage. Like, have you ever seen a dog on one side of the fence and they're usually like a friendly dog, and then they're met with these other dogs? If they were in a dog park, they would be the best of friends. But for some reason, that fence in between them makes them want to fight. And it's like the same thing online sometimes. You see it in comment sections. It's disturbing, honestly.
I am sure you heard a lot about it doing this research
Yes.
project from
Yep.
all of us. But that's interesting because I always assumed that, right? That like you get kind of like the guise of having, not to look someone in the eye when you say something harmful or hurtful to them.
Exactly.
And then you've got the people that are even a layer deeper who don't have a profile picture, don't have any followers, just kind of troll online. And then they're kind of like twice removed from that
Right.
interaction because they're not even representing their real self. Maybe they are, but you know what I
Right.
mean? Like their face, right?
They
And their
get to be
brand.
someone completely different if they want to be. Yep.
And what do you think? And I didn't expect to go down this path actually, but what do you think from the research like causes that? Is that like some sort of like illness or what do you think it is?
No, I think, well, I guess in the extreme versions it may be, something that is pathological, but it's literally called disinhibition. And it's something that I've studied in my other research too, because I'm a director of online programs at Rutgers School of Social Work. So I've also looked at it in terms of how students interact with each other within discussion threads for asynchronous classes, because it can happen there too when you're getting into like more sensitive topics or difficult discussions. People may not realize that what they're saying, lacks nuance or the tone that you would typically hear. So some of it is perfectly innocent, and others, it might be that they want attention and they're okay with getting negative attention rather than positive attention because maybe the person isn't getting it from elsewhere. I think there's a lot of reasons for that. And it's really unfortunate. And some just, I think in their head, it's like, well, I'm allowed to do this. This is my right. And, you're the one that put yourself out there. So it's not my fault that you're on the internet, where I don't personally agree with that. I like to lead with kindness, whether I know the person or not, and whether they chose to be on the internet or not, whether they're a celebrity or not. I feel like it's just, for me, it's 10 times easier to just be nice. I don't personally understand why people are so mean.
Yeah, I always say when I'm building some sort of content around reality TV or doing an interview, I just did an interview with a Harvard law student earlier this afternoon, and one of the questions she was asking me was about like what kind of like my messages to people. And it's like, whether you're on TV, whether you're an actor or an actress, whether you're an influencer, whether you're just a content creator, whether you're a normal person, like the common denominator there is that we are human beings.
Yep.
We have feelings, we have emotions, they're complex, they're nuanced. And I personally try to look at everyone and give them grace, whether they say or do the wrong thing, especially if you're a public figure of some sort, because when you're a public figure or you're on a reality show or you're doing something online, having a meltdown, whatever that is, like you're doing that in front of the whole world. Most people get to do that in the privacy of their own life. Like
Right.
if someone makes a giant mistake on reality TV, the world is coming for their head, where you could make that mistake or say that same thing in real life and life kind of goes on. And you have people that love you and are surrounding you with support, even if it's, not the best thing. But it always blows my mind how people choose to be negative or hurtful or harmful to someone over just kind. Or my favorite thing to say, which makes me feel like I'm the internet's dad, is when I was in about kindergarten, I learned if you don't have something nice to say, don't say anything at all. And I think that can work for us adults as well.
Agreed. Interestingly, and just to go back to that point, about this happening so much in comment sections and everything, it's also the age of social media and the internet. Humans are not meant to hear feedback about themselves every second of the day at their fingertips.
Strangers.
You know what I mean? Yeah, from strangers. That's not something that we historically have had to endure to this extent. But there is actually an aspect of human nature as it relates to human degradation and public humiliation. There is research on that as well, which is very interesting. If you even think about like fictionally Game of Thrones, right? Cersei Lannister and the shame, right?
Shame.
For some reason, humans have this thing in us where we feel the need to like publicly show that someone has done something wrong or that we're not happy with something that someone has done. So that's very interesting too.
That's a very good point. And I had, again, that's another thing I never thought about, like getting the constant feedback all the time.
Yeah.
I know, you know, where I notice, and this is a little bit off topic, but that's okay. That's what the podcasts are for, right?
Yep.
I notice lately that the amount of like notifications, ding, 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 it's like text message, group text message, phone calls,
Yeah.
work messages, work emails, personal emails, DMs, TikTok DMs, Twitter, like
It's so much constantly.
It's non-stop.
Yeah.
Like any given, I cleared here. I'm looking right now. I cleared my notifications right as I was getting on here. And by the way, my Instagram notifications have been turned off for like 2 years at this point.
Right.
And so I'm looking on here. I've already got 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Too many to count. Notifications.
Oh my God.
Just since we started, what, 20 minutes ago?
Wow. Yeah.
We got on here. And to me, it's like that. And it's like ding, ding, ding. And you can't concentrate on anything.
Yep.
And then when it's like negativity or feedback or something like that, it super heightens it.
Yep.
Plus, you're also kind of like overstimulated all the time. I think we're all very overstimulated all the time now.
100%. Yeah. It's to the point where sometimes I even catch myself. I'm like, okay, I'm going to sit down and watch a TV show. And then I'm also going to scroll on my phone while I'm watching the TV show. Like, okay,
I do the same thing.
You've got to relax here.
I know. I do the same thing. You know, my therapist had me track, because I've been like kind of dealing with feeling burnt out, and she's had me like track stuff that I was doing, and like if it was, you know, more than a 15-minute interval, I document it. And so I documented it, and like she wanted me to get the multitasking. So like pay attention to when you're multitasking. And so like all of these things that I thought I was doing, like going on, you know, I make time to go on like 15-minute walks with my dog. Well, guess what I'm doing on those walks? I'm responding to work emails.
Yeah.
I'm editing like podcast clips on my phone for social media, because it's like, and I'm sitting there, I'm like, wow, I think I'm walking, I'm taking a 15-minute break, but I'm really not.
Yeah.
And I think same with the, you know, movies at night, like sit down to watch a movie or a show. It's how long do I go before I pick up my phone and start scrolling, or I'm like, oh, I need to go buy this on Amazon or whatever that is. Like, I think it's just so much information all the time.
And I think that's where mindfulness comes in. That's not my area of expertise. I actually have one of my best friends is an absolute expert in mindfulness. And, you know, with the walk, for example, to try to prevent yourself from doing that checking and looking at your phone, you can go on that walk with intentionality and say, okay, during this walk, these are the things that I'm going to make sure I do. This is something that I've tried to help myself with personally, where I'll say, okay, today I'm going to see how many birds I can see on my way walking, and I'll count the birds. So I'm intentionally looking through nature. And maybe the next time I'll say, okay, this time I'm going to see how many different sounds that I hear, you know, so I personally like to use like the 5 senses and have a goal set so that when I am walking, I'm forcing myself to do the mindfulness. And when I have that goal in mind, it helps me. I'm not really great at just the open-ended, like I will be one with the universe and be, you know, silent. I can't, my mind will drift off right away. So I find that the goal setting helps redirect my attention.
That's a great idea. I'm actually going to try that, but I can't count the birds because there's so many pigeons in my neighborhood that it would become like anxiety inducing trying to count all of the pigeons flying around.
Right. And then, well, you have to search for the baby pigeon, because isn't that what they say? You never see any baby pigeons. So that'll be what you're looking for.
That's a good point. I've never noticed a baby pigeon.
Right.
But Is that something the people that like don't believe the birds are real say?
I don't think so, but that's a good point. That might be actually, maybe that's where I got that from. I promise I'm not a bird conspiracy theorist.
It's so funny. I didn't even know what that was. And I kept seeing like stickers like on little lamp poles and stuff around the city a few years ago. It says the birds aren't real. I'm like,
Right.
this has to mean something else. But no, it literally means people think
Yeah.
the birds aren't real.
I think it did, to be fair, I think it did start off as a gag, but maybe some people do believe that the birds are not real. I happen to believe the birds are real. So,
I've seen plenty of dead pigeons that are inside out, and I'm pretty confident that's real.
got it. Yep.
Yeah.
I'll believe you.
Anyway, let's talk about this research paper.
Yes.
This just dropped. What was it? Last week, published.
Yes.
So again, it is the links below if anyone wants to read the full research paper. I think you have to buy it, right? Isn't it?
Yeah, it's like
I
think it's like $17.95 or something, and and then you can own the copy yourself.
Yeah. And one of the things that made me excited to participate in this research with you as one of the subjects of it or participants of it was that there's not a lot of research on the mental health aspects and the experiences of reality TV cast members. Now, as you point out in this paper, that reality TV can be traced back to, I think it was like the 1940s. I have personally traced it back to like the late 80s with Cops and the talk shows that would come out of there, eventually becoming like Jerry Springer and stuff, because they were telling narratives about people and kind of putting their lives out there in those dramatic ways. But it goes all the way. Oh, we've got a little friend.
Hello, this is Coda.
Hello, Coda. For those of you just listening,
you're showing them that I don't actually have a library behind me. Stop.
For those of you that are listening, her cat Coda just jumped onto the screen, so we had a little visitor.
Sorry about that.
So when you decided you were going to take on this research project, what was your inspiration, or was there a tipping point or a pivotal point that you were like, this is something that I think we need to look into, or that I want to start looking into?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say reality TV is a guilty pleasure of mine. I love watching reality TV, but I started picking up on things, and maybe it's because I've done, scripted television work, where I just started noticing that people were saying things while they were obviously intoxicated. And I felt like, would they have said that if they weren't intoxicated? Or, just picking up on little things. I'm very, very passionate about ethics and autonomy and all of that. So when I started picking up on these things that were questionable, I wanted to look more into it. I think it's important that the entertainment that we consume is ethical. There are people on the other side of the screen. And I think even more so with reality TV, you are having real people that are being thrust into the spotlight that don't know what to do with that. They don't necessarily know what to anticipate and what is going to come on the other side. They might think that they do, but they don't have like the support or the team that like a celebrity might, where, there's like a wraparound service to help them when the public is scrutinizing them. So just thinking about all of that this is going to impact real people who are going to have to go back to their busy lives at work. Like the things that are shown on TV could actually impact their livelihood. They could lose their job because of things happening. So all of that just made me really question it and want to dig deeper. I care a lot about people, as I've discussed. And I think that there is a difference between choosing to be an actor and being on a show where you play a character versus being on a show where you think you're playing yourself and someone else has decided on a character for you. Because the audience doesn't realize that. The audience thinks you're playing yourself, and they have no idea what goes into what they're actually seeing on the other side of the screen.
You nailed that. And I think that what is so difficult for so many of us, whether we felt like we got, portrayed properly, good at it, bad at it, whatever that is. I think what's so hard is like you have so many expectations, which is something that, you identified in your work, but you have so many expectations of what it's going to be and how it's going to change your life. And, or in my case, like what it was going to be like if I found love and got married and all of that
Mm-hmm.
stuff. And then almost the expectation that nobody who hasn't gone through it can't understand is the expectation that you're actually going to be yourself, portrayed as yourself.
Right.
And through the power of editing and through the power of, psychological, I would say, manipulation from the whole structure of how these shows are done and manufactured and how you're cast to be a certain way. And they decide all of that. It's impossible to feel, you go in and you just expect to be mostly portrayed as yourself. Like for me, and I didn't get a bad edit or anything, but I was like, I'm just going to be myself. I'm going to act with integrity because that's a core value of mine. I'm not going to say or do anything out of character. I have nothing to worry about. And I think most people go in with that mindset, whether they, say it or not, thinking
Right.
I'm just going to be myself. I'm fun. I'm cool. I'm dramatic. I'm this, I'm that. America's going to love me or the world's going to love me because, who are we surrounded by? People that love us.
Right.
Right. So it's
Yep.
like, it's our worldview, and you just have no idea or no consideration to even think, oh my gosh, this could go horribly wrong, and not even necessarily for something I did or
Right.
said.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Now to also show a different side, there actually are some people who go into this knowing that they are going to maybe portray a slight character, which I also find interesting. There was
Mm-hmm.
a couple of people that I spoke to that they were able to compartmentalize the person that they portrayed in this show versus who they are in real life. I think that is not typical. I think that that is a very specific person that is able to
Yeah.
do that. But their outcome, because they were able to do that, was more positive in the long run because they were able to make that separation for themselves, and they kind of decided like this is just a character I'm portraying, and therefore what the audience says, it doesn't really matter because that's not
Because
even
it's
me
not
anyway.
real.
Yeah.
I love that. And whenever I talk to cast members, especially not even just from Love is Blind, from like all the shows that people I talk to, especially when the show is airing, they're understandably hot and ready to explode.
Yeah.
But I always tell them, I'm like, you have to separate yourself from the edit. And I know that's hard because of the public, but like it's the hardest thing for people to do. That's the number one piece of advice I give people is you have to separate yourself from the edit. And I always tell myself, it's something that I did. It's not who I am.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is another thing that's very, very hard for people to do is to
Right.
just accept that I did this. And to so many people in the world, what they saw in that hour and 20 minutes of my love story or my life, they think that that hour and 20 minutes like sums up my 35 at the time years,
Right.
39 years now on this earth. And that's just not the case. And so
Right.
it's kind of like that job you had that didn't work out for you, or that, person you had in your life that wasn't right for you and you had to make the cut. You got to kind of be able to think of it like that. And it seems like it's just really hard for most people, and understandably so.
Right, right. I think that makes a lot of sense because even when we make mistakes in our real lives, we don't have a camera that has this evidence forever and ever. And I think part of the other issue is that the audience, not like I said earlier, they don't realize what goes into this, so they believe that everything that they're seeing is 100% accurate and real, forgetting that clips can be cut together. One of the participants that I spoke to gave an example where they said that someone asked them for the definition of a word. They said the definition of the word, and then the editor took what they said about, that definition and applied it somewhere else to make it seem like they were saying something mean about someone. So just completely
Jeez.
took words that they did say, but used it in a scenario that never actually existed. And what makes me nervous personally is with the advent of AI, and I said this in my paper, with artificial intelligence, we can do, deep fakes and voiceovers that sound like the person actually said it, especially if you've, signed over your rights. They can take samples of your voice and then just create you saying something that you never did. They don't even have to show your face. They can have you doing a voiceover over a montage or B-roll, and then the audience is going to believe that you've said that. So that's a little scary and something to pay attention to if people are signing up for reality TV, to make sure that they're really looking at their contracts so that they're not allowing people to do that.
Well, I think we're on the precipice of those contracts in a lot of cases being deemed illegal, and a shift coming, especially starting with Love is Blind, as the National Labor Relations Board declared that we should be considered employees. And of course, that's going to go to court because they're not going to let us disrupt the business model that much without a fight. But those basic things in the contracts, it says we can misrepresent you, we can defame you, you have no recourse. And, I read that and I was like, what am I going to like? But you go and you ask, what's the definition of, some word, and then you say it, and then that's used in a scene out of context. That's
you
crazy.
Can't anticipate that, right?
You can't.
And that's actually part of the first theme of my research paper. It's unfulfilled. Let me just look up the wording. It's unfulfilled motivations, expectations, and promises. And then one of the quotes was, "Be careful what you wish for." So essentially, you're taking people who have stars in their eyes, a lot of ambition and motivation to go on a TV show, whether it be because they're looking for a really fun experience, just like, a check mark off the bucket list, doing something unique, an adventure, or maybe even looking for fame. Some people are even looking for their businesses to take off and see that as a way to do that too. And so you've got these people with really high hopes, and in some instances, people who are coming from very vulnerable backgrounds. Like, I remember back in the day watching American Idol, for example, and you always see the stories, these traumatic experiences that people have been through, which are so heartwarming, and yet it's a singing TV show, right? So these are all motivators for someone to want to be involved and to say, I can do this, this won't be me. And then on top of it, because they're so motivated, they don't want to give up their spot. So saying, hold on one sec, let me find an entertainment lawyer, or hold on one sec, let me read this. It feels rushed because they're afraid that their spot is going to be given up to someone else who's not going to read the contract in full or not going to hire a lawyer. And so it just becomes much more rushed, and people are signing things that maybe they wouldn't have if they had more time.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I know I wasn't under as much pressure and time to sign as some of the other cast members I've talked to have, but they do kind of pressure you. And there is always that unspoken commentary from throughout the whole process that, like, you're lucky to have this, you're easily replaceable. And to your point about why people go on these shows or what their motivations are, I think too, at least from what I've learned and in my experience, like, I actually did go on because I thought it was a good way to maybe meet someone. And it was different, and I believed in the process. But that's also what they sold me, because I think during the casting process, they picked up on me kind of not being concerned about fame or fortune or anything that comes with it. Like, I genuinely thought maybe I could meet someone this way. And they'll sell you whatever's, if they want you, they'll sell you whatever's going to get you to agree to do it. So by the time you're signing that contract, you've already been sold almost like your dream scenario for whatever your motivations are. So then when those aren't met, you also feel a little bit cheated, and you feel like you were conned and scammed. And that also contributes to all of, I think all of those missed motivations.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. And
So
having those high expectations and just really it's an even further fall from grace. And sometimes you don't realize it right away. Like
yeah,
one of my favorite quotes from this is a little bit of a lengthy one. I would love to read it if we have time,
yeah,
but you let
we
me
do.
know.
No,
Okay,
go
great.
for it. We do.
It's just so poetic. So it was like being caught in a torrent that doesn't feel dangerous yet, but you have no ability to get out of it. It started out where you choose to jump into the river and it's a gentle current. You've made the decision to go down it and you can get out at any time. But then at some point it becomes too rapid to escape. You're still having fun like a whitewater rafting trip, but then it gets to the point when you're crushed under the rapids and you're bashed against rocks and there's no escape. You realize that you're drowning, but there's nothing that you can do about it. I just
Uh,
so
I
poetic and just really eloquent in a way to say like, yeah, I did choose this. I was having a great time and then all of a sudden I realized, wait a second, I feel like I'm being exploited and these things don't feel right and now I can't get out of it because it's too late.
and it's slow. That's the
Hmm.
thing. It's a slow burn.
Right.
It's like it's the frog in the pot of water. Like you're slowly boiling that water. The frog has
Right.
no idea what's going
Right.
on.
Right.
That's what it's like.
Yep.
I do want to continue into themes, but
Hmm.
one of the one of the parts I found interesting was that you chose the narrative identity theory.
Yes.
Um, can you, in layman's terms, explain what that theory is and what that means, um, in your work, and then why you felt that was a good application? I think just hearing the word narrative sounds gives people an idea, but I think hearing from you what this theory is, why it was chosen, and how it was applied would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm so sorry, everyone. Coda, my cat, continues to want to be a star. He may just keep on coming up here, and that's okay. I'm
It's
going to try
fine
to
with
ignore
me.
him.
It's fine with me.
I even had the door closed. Like this cat literally opened the door fully
Oh my
to be a part of this
gosh.
conversation. So, um,
Motivated.
exactly. Motivated indeed. So narrative identity theory, it basically helps to frame the understanding. It is the story that we tell about ourselves. What we understand about ourselves is extremely important. And so when a narrative is different than what the narrative we tell ourselves is, it can mess with us basically. And these narratives can be past, present, and future, and it emphasizes coherence, agency or autonomy, and community, or and excuse me, and communion. So when
Mm.
any of these things is sort of different than our own understanding of ourselves, it can negatively impact our mental well-being. So it's the disruption between public persona versus our self-perception. The agency aspect is that loss of control over our own story. So when you're talking about, an editing process where someone else gets to determine how you look or the story and change it from what actually happened, that is going to impact our sense of autonomy and agency. And then the communion aspect is the isolation from social connections. So as human beings, we need to have connections with others. Not all of the shows do this, but a lot of them, even when they're not immersive, tend to isolate people. And that's so that they can make sure that the story gets told on camera. So even when the cameras are shut off and they're going back to their hotel rooms, they are put in their own hotel rooms and they're not allowed to talk to each other. And so that can be really isolating and impact that communion aspect of narrative identity theory. And then there's something called the redemption arc, basically, where you regain control of your identity and your own story, and you turn any challenges into opportunities for growth, which is also known as meaning making. And you gain self awareness over any difficult conversations. You figure out what you've learned from that. And so all of those things just really spoke to me and felt like it fit really well with what happens in reality TV and the
Right.
experiences. Yeah.
And you don't always get your arc.
You
You
don't
don't
always get
always
your
get it.
arc.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I tell myself when I thought the end of my reality TV story, right? I thought, well, initially I thought it was going to be get married and live happily ever after. Then I thought it was going to be um, surviving. Like I went, probably when we first connected, I was probably in the, oh my God, I just got to survive today and then
Right,
do it
right.
again tomorrow mode, right? And then I thought to myself, as I was going through kind of like my growing, my reflecting, and my like comprehension of what actually had happened and how that much this had impacted me and in my career, my mental health, all of that stuff. And then I thought, oh, my end of my story is going to be when I'm feeling like myself again. And
Mm-hmm.
then I realized I'm like, oh my God, this is chapter one. And I started You Can. And I was like, okay, well, now I'm trying to unionize people. And I'm just like, the story just keeps on going. But like,
And that's your meaning making, Nick. Your
yeah,
creation of you can and taking this experience that you had and saying, I want to make a difference. I want to change this. That's the redemption arc. That's
mm,
maybe you don't feel it all the way yet. I can't, I'm not in your shoes, but that's the meaning making aspect that you're doing there.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I will say, like, not everyone gets that. And like I'm really stubborn and I'm
Right.
very like driven. And when I think something's the right thing to do, like you better get out of my way because I will bulldoze people to do the right
Mm-hmm.
thing. But like if I had a villain edit, and here's what I think part of the problem with all of this is I'm starting to realize the people that are the most vocal usually got a bad edit or were a villain or were for some way, shape, or form felt like they were misrepresented.
Right.
But people don't want to listen to those people and don't take them as seriously because they just
Mm-hmm.
think they're complaining because
Right.
of the bad edit or because they weren't represented in a good way or didn't get all of the expectations they had met. And so they're immediately discredited. So
Mm-hmm.
that even telling their own story doesn't get them that final arc because people are
Exactly.
just like, shut up, you're a psycho, or shut up and die, or whatever horrible thing they have to
Yep.
say at that moment. And it just totally takes away that part of it. And
Hmm.
it just villainizes them even further. I never really thought about that in that
Right.
way until recently.
Absolutely.
So that's interesting. Man, it just makes me feel for people that are
Yeah.
just trying to find some sort of closure and they can't even
Yep.
get their own story.
And there's an
Um,
aspect of what you're describing too of what's called disenfranchised grief, where you feel a loss of something that it's not acceptable to talk about or that people won't understand. So when we talk about grief and loss, we think of people who have died, but it can apply to other things as well. It can apply to the life we thought that we would have or how a situation would wind up one way and it didn't wind up that way. So there are grieving processes in a lot of different aspects of our life. And in this scenario, it's that people are telling them, well, I'm not going to listen to you because obviously you just don't like your edit. Or, oh, come on, you should just be grateful because you were on TV. Not everybody gets to be on TV. Or people that just don't get it. Like maybe they're trying to listen and they just will never understand. So it's that sense of disenfranchised grief that also impacts the mental well being as well.
that's I had not heard of that term before. That's definitely how I felt right after my divorce. I was like, nobody gets this, nobody
Hmm.
understands. To everybody else, it was on TV. It's like watching a movie and then you forget about it. And
Right.
it was like I was going through so much loss that people, even in my life, close people to me, like I just felt like they couldn't get it. It is
Right.
so it's a that's very interesting. I'd never heard of that before.
Yeah.
So one other thing I wanted to ask you. So we talked about like the unfulfilled motivations, expectations, promises was the first theme. I want to get to the other two, but I wanted to ask you another question about that. What do you think can be done, or what do you maybe not can be done industry wide, but if you have that too, but like, what do you think a person who's going into a reality TV show now or is considering it or going through it, what do you think they can do to better align their expectations with the reality of reality TV?
I think that's a great question, because I think there are some people that no matter how much you tell them, there are some people that just, they won't believe you until they experience it for themselves.
So true.
You know what I mean? They think, no, I'm
Yeah.
going to be the one that I am more powerful than this. This is something that I'm going to be able to do, even though nobody else was able to do it, or most people aren't able to do it.
That's how
Um,
I feel about the people that say you signed up for this. It's because I think they could have done it better or
yes.
different or wouldn't be impacted by it.
Right. Yep, absolutely. So I think for other people who maybe are don't have that perspective, just really paying attention, listening to the actual voices of people who have experienced, being on a reality TV show, and hearing those personal perspectives. And that's part of why I wanted to do a qualitative study rather than a quantitative study, because I wanted to amplify actual voices of people who have been on reality TV and hear directly from their perspective. So, the beauty of a qualitative study is, no, it's not exactly generalizable because there's not enough number, but you're getting to hear the deep thoughts of people who you don't know who's talking. So they might be a little bit more open, and you get to
Mm.
really have an understanding of their perspective. So I hope people will listen to that. I think also, once you've heard those perspectives and you get an education on these practices, then go back and rewatch some of your shows that you like and see it. One of the things that I know about, because I've been, I've filmed things before, is the idea of continuity. So when you're watching a scene, if someone is eating food and then all of a sudden their food has disappeared, then there was a jump in that
Yeah.
scene. There was a cut, right? That's the whole reason on Love is Blind, why they have those gold chalices,
Yeah.
is because they don't want you to see that the liquid in the glass has gone down or up, and that way they can cut things easier. I'm assuming, allegedly. I'm
No,
not really
that's
sure.
correct. Yeah.
But
I can say I can't say it's 100% correct, but I can say that it's correct
right,
from
it's
my
maybe
perspective.
one of the reasons. Yeah,
And now I do think it's a branding exercise. Those things are so
totally.
popular. Like I have to hide them. And I have some, and I hide them in my house because otherwise people would see them, go crazy, and then it become a
Right.
topic of discussion. And then I'm sitting here with my friends talking about the show again, and it's like,
Yeah. Yep. Right. So just little things like that. Once you become educated on what to look out for, I tend to view things from the perspective of, how would I feel if that were me? So if I said that thing on screen, would I regret that afterwards? Right. And I guess I'm thinking of, when someone is very obviously intoxicated and they're saying something that, people are making fun of afterwards, or it feels embarrassing even when you're just watching it. Would I want someone filming me intoxicated and putting that on national television for everybody to see? How would that make me feel afterwards, when I am coherent and I am thinking and making decisions from my logical mind? You know what I mean?
no.
That I mean, just from a consent perspective, how can you get someone's consent to be on TV if you're filming them while they're intoxicated? Right? And there's many
And
shows
to
that do
do
this.
things. Yeah, it's to do things. I actually wanted to ask you, what when I went on, God, what? Oh, I went on a podcast that covers true crime and cults. What was it called? That's so effed up. I think it's called. I'm so sorry to
I thought you
Ashley
were
for
like, oh,
screwing
that's
that
so
up.
effed up that I can't
No.
remember.
I
No, it's
think that's
called.
what it's called. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry to Ashley, who's the hostess. But one of the things that we chatted about was like informed consent, and it's like
Yes.
I can make informed consent, but once I have that drink or that second drink, or I haven't eaten, or whatever that might be, or it's 12 hours into filming, like, am I
Right.
still able to give that consent? I think there's real questions about that.
Mm-hmm. I agree with
And
you. I mean, mental health professionals have to give, request informed consent on a regular basis, even from
Yeah.
the perspective of competency, and to make sure that someone fully understands what they're getting into. You have to really make sure that they understand, and that maybe in different scenarios that consent will apply there as well, because it might change. You might need to check back in, and maybe that's a practice that needs to be adopted too, where, all right, you agreed to this, now let's do a check-in and make sure you still agree to this. How do you feel?
Yeah, and I want to have one of my pillars is that I want to have independent mental health professionals for each cast member,
Yes.
who is part of their role there would be to have the ability to work with their person and determine if they're able to give consent to be filmed. So
Yep.
like I think back to my experience in Mexico when Danielle had a panic attack and there was no mental health professional there to help her. Like she should not have been filming after
Mm-hmm.
that. And I think, and I compare it often to like the NFL's concussion protocol that now has an independent neurologist conducting
Right.
concussion tests on the sideline, and outside of the team has the ability to say this person cannot play. They are
Right.
concussed. And when it was a team doctor, it would be like, they're fine, send them back in. So I think of it kind of like that, because if we have, someone there who has to get consent on a regular basis, understands consent, they can
Mm-hmm.
make sure that the person's in a place mentally where they can give consent.
Right. And so something that very interesting that happened organically with my study was that it just so happened that half of the people I spoke to filmed in the US, and the other half, basically around half, filmed in the UK even though they were from the US. And so in the UK, they have different standards of mental health evaluations and just
Mm-hmm.
support throughout the process. So I forgot to mention this earlier, but this is really what drove me to want to research this as well. When I started doing my research, I saw that 21 people had died by suicide within the span of 10 years in the US. And yet there really has been no progress in mental health support. Whereas in the UK, 2 people died by
Yeah.
suicide, and almost immediately they changed the policies to
Yeah.
protect people's mental well-being. And so in the
And there's still a
UK,
lot of work to do there in the
oh yes,
UK too, but
absolutely.
it's, yeah, they have something.
They have something. Yes, it is better than the US. It still has some work to do for sure.
Yeah.
But they have a regulatory body called Ofcom. It's kind of like the FCC here, but not exactly. Ofcom also cares about the people that are on the reality TV show,
Mm.
whereas the FCC, they're more interested in consumers. So they don't have any protections for the people actually on the show. And for viewers who may not know, if you're a professional actor or actress or whatever, you do have some protections because you have a union. You have
You have SAG-AFTRA.
SAG-AFTRA,
Yep.
exactly. They can protect you. Reality TV, they don't have a union. So not only do they not have the protections from the FCC, but then they also don't have a labor union protecting them either. Whereas in the UK, they at least have some rules within Ofcom.
Exactly. And I'd like to add yet. We don't have a union yet.
Right.
We're going to change
Yes.
that. Yeah.
Yep.
Great. So another trend that you found was that, what was it? People had, oh my gosh, why am I blanking on? Hold on, let me check.
That's okay. I can say it. I have it up too.
It
Um,
was about authenticity.
yes.
I just want to get the language
Compromised.
right. There you go.
Yep. Compromised authenticity and identity. So that's just leaning more into the specifics of the editing process and what that might look like. There's even some research that names it, and they call it Frankenbiting,
Mm-hmm.
where they create a whole storyline. And to compare the US and the UK does have contractual obligations to not defame people or to change the storyline in a reality TV show. They do have to still stick to the storyline. That doesn't mean that they don't try to direct storylines so that they do happen, and they do try to manufacture it in a way, but they do so more in the US after it's already been filmed. And so
in
many,
the US too, at least in my experience and what I've seen, there's actually story producers. So there's like a producer that's kind of working behind the scenes outside of the person who's directing the scenes.
right,
And that person's keeping track of the story and making sure that they hit the story points they want to hit on.
right. And it's to the point where even producers, in some people that I spoke to, said that they would literally text someone within the what's being recorded to say this or do this. So the person looks like they might just be looking at their phone, and really they're being told by someone to do something else for the camera. Or they're being, directed in another way where maybe they did say something, but then the producer is saying, can you say that again, but can you say it this way? So it's almost like line readings as well.
Yes.
That happens too.
That is true. And even stuff about like tense. So it's like, oh, say it like it's present tense. It's like, this happened 6 weeks ago. I don't even remember it. And it's like,
Right.
well, this happened. Say this. That's exactly right.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And so that then the person winds up feeling like this is a misrepresentation of who I am. And the stories that are typically told, they might fit into a certain theme. Like you said earlier, maybe someone's story is that they're the villain or that they're the princess, or it could be, even racially biased. Like that's the angry Black woman, so just leaning into like these stereotypes and putting people into boxes and pigeonholing them into characters that really don't represent themselves. And that's going to disrupt that narrative identity, the story that they've told themselves. And that makes them struggle with their own self-perception and their authenticity. And then if people are scrutinizing them, they feel like they need to, fight back and say, that's not me. What are you talking about? So you constantly feel like you're defensive.
What do you think are the long-term effects of that, or people feeling like they don't really have control of their identity?
I imagine, and I can't say for sure, that's actually one of the things I think should be researched after
effects,
this is
yes.
the long-term effects. But, shame, I suspect is a big theme. I think as human beings, shame can really take a front seat for a lot of people and can be the culprit of a lot of the things that we deal with. And so if people are constantly saying you're not good enough and you're a terrible person, whether you know that to be true or not, that's going to take a toll on you. I imagine that you're going to always have to feel like you're sticking up for yourself and always have to fight for people to know who you are. And at some point, it might even impact your own knowledge of yourself and your own understanding of yourself. You may not know your own identity after a while. There's theories, and it's not related to reality TV, but for example, there's a personality disorder called borderline personality disorder. And one of the main or central ideas of borderline personality disorder is that it's people having difficulty with the sense of self. And so that might impact them being able to stand strong in their convictions and knowing what they want, and I'm not just talking about people with borderline personality disorder, but in general, if you don't have a confident understanding of yourself, you might become a people pleaser. You might become codependent, where you're trying to find meaning of who you are through other people and the stories that they tell you of who you are.
Yeah. I also think, and I don't know if I don't think that this came up in the paper in your research, but maybe it did in a different way or with one person and it wasn't a trend. But I've noticed some people can or have sort of become the character that they were on the TV and almost embraced it to the point where like they don't really have the sense of former self. They only have become like the character that they were on the show, or that almost like the show made them become. Like, did you see any of that in your
Yes.
interviews and research? Okay.
Yes, absolutely. Just embracing like, okay, fine. If that's who you think I am, then that's who I'm going to be. Or like, that
Yeah.
phrase, I'm in my villain era. If you
Yeah.
think I'm a villain, then I'll be a villain. I give up at this point, because if you're never going to believe me for who I am, then I'm just going to play into it. And some of the people that I spoke to that had that perspective was like the one that I mentioned before, where it's like, okay, well, I was playing a character.
Yeah.
This is the character I portrayed, and that's not really me. I'll keep on playing that character just for you if it makes you happy.
Well, and
You know?
it also can become, and I'm speculating, there's certain people I'm thinking about that I'm speculating on across several different shows and even networks. But like, it almost becomes a point. I've talked to Danielle Gates from 90 Day Fiance about this, where it's almost like if you become the character, you can get on more shows, you
Mm-hmm.
can make more money. And then
Right.
it becomes the point where it's like it becomes your way of life. And the only way you can make money is to go on more shows and become more of a caricature of this character.
Right.
Or you see people who maybe have been portrayed as like the party person or the one who's always drinking, and then before you know it, like, you always got to be a little tipsy, and then all of a sudden you maybe develop a drinking problem. And that, this isn't anyone specific I'm thinking of, but like,
Yeah.
that's an example. And it can be very dangerous to like become the character to the point where it becomes your way of life and the way you make money and your career, and then it just consumes you.
Right. And I think that speaks to narrative identity theory too, because although
Mm-hmm.
you've embraced this character and now you are finding success based on this other version of you, if that's incongruent to the actual person that you are, I imagine that would also cause some negative outcomes, because that's a lot to upkeep. For
Yeah.
people to constantly think that this is who you are and really you're this entirely different person. But I think that would also be great as part of sort of the longer term
We definitely need
study.
long-term studies. We
Yeah.
definitely need another thing that I've noticed, and then we'll get to the third theme. Another thing I've noticed too is I feel like some people get stuck
Mm-hmm.
in this, like, and maybe this is kind of the same thing as what I was just saying to become here, but they get like stuck at this moment in time
Yeah.
when it was everyone knew who they were, everyone was following their story,
Yeah.
and they know they can get the dopamine hit from the clicks, from the likes, from all of that if they just keep talking about it, keep reliving it over and over again. And I feel like that's also dangerous, and I've seen that happen to people that I know and that I care about. And I think it happens in real life too, right? Like, I have a
Yeah.
friend who's stuck on a relationship that ended 3 years ago, like it
Right.
ended 2 months ago. And it's like, I think people can get stuck in these things for different reasons. And I would love to see like long-term studies to show these long-term effects on people, and how do
Yeah.
people heal, and how do people overcome and move on, and what comes with that. And one thing, I've shared this on the show before, but like, I learned last winter that I actually have new public social anxiety that I've never really had. I went
Mm-hmm.
to a bar with a girl that I was had just started dating, and this was the first time that we had really been out in public together. And it was a very popular bar in the west loop of Chicago, which is a very trendy place to be. I say it's the demo. It's like the 20 and 30 year olds that are out and about at this bar. And I was in this bar and it was packed. And there was like so many people that were like pointing and this and that. And then, she's my girlfriend now, but like, she went to like kiss me in public, like on the cheek, and I freaked out. And I was like, I
Mm-hmm.
can't. And I'd never had that before.
Right.
And I usually don't go out there in that place because it's the demo and I don't want that kind of attention. But like, doing it, I realized, oh my God, like, I don't like being here. I was sweating. It was the middle of winter. I'm sweating. I'm anxious. I'm like
Mm-hmm.
taking bathroom breaks just to like regulate myself. And it's all new stuff from stuff that happened years ago that I'm
Right.
just now kind of realizing is there being put in new or different situations. So I think there's a lot of stuff, and that's, basic, and it's not too big of a deal. Like, I can manage it, but there's things like that I think you have to develop? What are the long-term mental health concerns that come out of this?
Yeah.
Which
I think that makes a
yeah,
lot of sense too, right? When you've been on TV and you know that people might know who you are when you go out in public. Oh no, they're perceiving me. What do they think of me? What if they have a camera and they're going to video this happening and then post
that's
it
happened
online,
to
and then
me.
people
That's
are going to
happened
make
to
fun
me.
of me.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that's very valid. I think that those would probably come to my mind too if I was on TV. And just to go back to what you first said, just about that, it's like you keep on measuring yourself, or you keep on going back to this moment in time. I think that could happen with any of us, in terms of a moment in time where we may have felt the most success or the most happy, and we keep on comparing and going back to that. I identify with that myself. And to put myself in those shoes and say there are times where I feel shame because when I was 18, I was on a Broadway national tour. And sometimes my mom will say, "Oh, this is my daughter, Chrissy. She was on a Broadway national tour." And I'm like, "Yeah, that was when I was 18. I'm not that good. I haven't been on one since then. And now I'm not good enough. That was really cool that I did that back then. And now I don't do that anymore." And so I feel, that's part of the identity too. I
Oh
personally,
yeah.
my identity was doing theater, and now I'm not doing that anymore. So I have to change my understanding of my identity. Now I'm a social worker. Now I'm a professor and a researcher, right? And so you change the story of yourself and realize these two things are true about me, and they're both wonderful, right? This is now just a different time. And maybe you're at a time in your life where you don't feel like you're, to that high part that you would consider yourself at that point. But that doesn't mean you're not successful. It doesn't mean that you won't be successful in a different way in the future. So it's those comparisons that we have. And the comparisons aren't just with other people. The comparisons are what we have with ourselves in another given moment in time too.
So
You
true.
know?
So true.
Yeah.
I know we're coming up on like our scheduled time. Do you have an extra few minutes to go
Oh
through
yeah,
a couple more?
absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. So the third trend that you found was about challenging mental health and coping skills, or maybe just coping, right?
Yeah, and coping. Yep,
Yeah.
exactly.
So can you talk to us about that trend and what you learned from your interviews?
Yeah, so that's pretty much when the production stops, and that's where the comparison also happens between the US productions and the UK productions, where the mental health support, in particular for the UK productions, continued on. But a lot of the support was focused around, like, maybe not really mental health support, but more so public relations training, and make sure you don't say this, make sure you don't violate your NDA.
Which I got that too, by the way. It was totally
Yeah,
useless. It's like if
right.
someone's mean to you, block them.
Right, right. Or don't block them. I've also heard that too, which is very interesting. Like, if, just don't say anything at all. I don't know about that, but yeah, so some of those things maybe were labeled as support, but really it's not supportive of the person, but more supportive of the production company. It seems like from afar. But this is also where what we mentioned earlier, the meaning making, the disenfranchised grief comes in, the feelings of isolation. One of the things about humans is that we need to feel validated, and we need to have things normalized. That's part of the reason why group therapy works so well, is because you come to a group of people who have had similar experiences, and you realize, oh, okay, I'm not alone. I'm not this one person on an island all by myself. There is someone else who has gone through this, and look at them, they've survived, or look at them, they understand me. So that's something that we need as people. And so when you have such a specific experience like being on reality TV, you have less people to work from to be able to validate that and normalize that. And then if you're isolating people from maybe even being able to talk to each other, or it's just hard because they're spread across the continent, then that can also make people feel isolated. But the meaning making, I think, is one of the best things for someone's mental health. And it comes in the shape of, like yourself, creating an organization that helps other people, or just looking at things from a different lens and saying, I watched myself go through this really terrible thing on television. And if anything, one of the quotes says, it held a mirror up to my face and made me realize that if I can survive that, I can survive anything. And so it's just really finding that inner strength and seeing, okay, I
Did
am
I
strong.
say that?
No, you didn't say
okay.
that.
I
You're
was like,
wow,
I say,
that's beautiful.
I was like, no. I was like, that's really the best, because I say that a lot. I'm like, what this taught me, when people are like, well, what'd you learn out of it? I'm like, it taught me that I can handle anything.
Yes.
I'm way more resilient than I ever thought I was. And now I feel like nothing can ever take me down.
Right.
Because it doesn't get any bigger than being on the biggest reality TV show in the world, and then being drugged through the mud where you lose your job, you get a divorce, and you have trouble. Like I was literally 3 days away from not being able to pay my mortgage when I got a paycheck from a new job. Like, it didn't get much worse. So
right.
to me, it was like, wow, I can overcome anything. Like, bring it on.
Yep.
So anyway,
Absolutely.
I'm sorry. Yeah. So
And
I didn't mean
did
to
it normalize for
that.
you? No, but did it normalize for you that, hey, wow, I had this thought too. Somebody else felt that way. How cool is that? That someone like yourself can read this paper and say, oh, someone else also thought that and felt this way. And it's a good way to normalize the experience and the after effects.
Yeah, I will be very candid. The first time I read it, which I know you sent it to me before it was published, I was on a plane and I actually teared up, because I was like, some of that might have been one of them. This was a while ago now, but it was so relatable.
Right.
And that was so refreshing.
And that just, I'm so glad that you were able to have that experience. And it's also, some people might read this and they've been on reality TV and they might say that was nothing like my experience at all. And that's okay too. It doesn't mean that their experience wasn't valid. And it's just that these happen to be the people that I spoke to. And I'm glad that I got to share their stories in a way.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you doing this work and, getting this conversation started. What I want to ask you, and this will be the last question, I actually think you probably could do a whole episode answering this question, but after your research and you've been very open, you're a consumer of reality TV, you enjoy it, which is totally fine. I want everyone, I always remind people, I want everyone to enjoy reality TV, but we can enjoy it and produce it ethically and still have fun with it without ruining people's lives. But what do you think are some of the most urgent things that you would like to see changed? And kind of expanding off of that, how do I want to word this? Let's start with that. I'm going to ask you two more questions. What do you think are some of the most urgent things that we need to change when it comes to reality TV and mental health?
So I think, first of all, within the contract itself, there should be no room for defaming someone. I think that people are interesting enough where we can tell their stories and not rework it. And it might mean that it takes a little longer to edit, or it takes a little longer to have, to film these people to get the things that you need. But I don't think that people should be allowed to mischaracterize other human beings. I think that there should be regulatory oversight to ensure that happens, because who's to say that people are going to follow a contract if they're not made to, unfortunately. I agree with what you said earlier. I think that in terms of mental health support, first of all, there needs to be more mental health support. Right now, psychological screenings tend to be a little surface level, and so that's not helpful.
Yeah, and used nefariously.
And used against you, yeah. So, exactly.
Yeah, we had a bunch of cast members try to get their psych evaluations, and they said no, that we contracted our rights to get them away.
Right.
How
So
is that legal?
as a social worker, like when I hear about a psychological evaluation, my immediate assumption is that it would be confidential. And I think that it should be confidential. To me, the purposes of a psychological evaluation is to assess whether someone is competent enough and will be mentally healthy enough to participate in a reality show. I don't think that the actual discussion or the things explored during the evaluation need to be shared. I think those specific details can be kept confidential, and it's just a yes, this person's good to go, or no, this person is not going to be safe to be on this show. And that doesn't mean that, just from the perspective of like do no harm to self or others. It doesn't mean that they're immediately, going to try to die by suicide or hurt someone else. It could just mean that this person has experienced a lot of trauma, and if they go on television and their trauma is used for their story, that's going to negatively impact them to the point where maybe they could, hurt themselves at some point. So just kind of really going more in depth there and not letting production be privy to that information that's assessed within that evaluation. And I think that third party provider should be the same third party provider throughout. So maybe they are on set and the person can request to speak to that person when needed. When the show is over, the person is able to talk to that person without fear that the contents of their conversation is going to go back to production. And that also helps with any NDAs as well. Maybe that that clinician or the therapist can be somehow written into the NDA. I mean, it shouldn't matter because when you talk to a clinician, it's confidential.
It's supposed to,
but
unless there's like fear of self-harm or something, or harm to others, right?
Yeah. But if it makes people feel like they can then be more open, then I think that's important. We all deserve to have somebody to talk to and to talk to openly. Because when you don't, that just leans into that conversation we had earlier about the feeling of isolation, not being able to share your story, that disenfranchised grief.
Yeah, I agree. For real, my last question, one takeaway you'd like for reality TV viewers, maybe even industry professionals, cast members, mental health professionals, like what's one takeaway you would want people to get from your research?
I think that this one should be obvious, but that you are dealing with real human beings, just like you are on the opposite end of the screen. We are all just people, and the way that we treat other human beings, for you, it might last for a second or for a season, but for that person, it can last their entire lifetime. And so, as human beings, we're fragile, and we need to treat others with dignity and respect and worth, no matter where you are in the equation. If you are a producer, I understand that is your livelihood. This is your job. If you're an editor, same thing. I feel like there's a certain cognitive dissonance that has to happen that allows you to almost dehumanize others. And I think the reminder is we are all humans, I think that's really important to remember.
Well, thank you for that. And thank you again for starting this research. Before we go, I always like to ask my guests if they want to ask me anything. And I think I forgot to remind you or tell you that at the beginning of the show. So
that's okay.
I'll give you a chance if you have anything that you want to ask me about anything. Literally ask me anything. The floor is yours for a minute here.
So I guess my question is, because you were just talking about, if you consume reality TV, that's okay. From your perspective, what is the best way for an audience member to assess whether the entertainment they're consuming is ethical? What are your suggestions in terms of still being a consumer of reality TV? How to be able to do that while still respecting the people on the screen?
That's a great question. I think it's very clear to me that reality TV is here to stay. I believe that ethical reality TV is possible. And my ask of people that enjoy the content is maybe a couple folds, but one, like watch it understanding that you're watching real people and that you're watching curated content that has been edited for entertainment purposes. And so what you're seeing is not real, or at the very best lacks context. So watch it for entertainment and then go about your life, and don't give space to hate or be vengeful or anything. Like if you don't have anything nice, don't say anything at all.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think advocacy work and joining this movement, this reality TV reckoning, or however we want to brand it, support the people that are coming out and speaking up, because there's more and more people doing it. Don't villainize them
Mm-hmm.
for talking about what their working conditions were like, or how their mental health has been impacted, or whatever that might be. Like, let's work together and let's advocate for the rights of cast members, past, current, and future. And then let's do what we can to share our perspective. If you do know what's going on, share it with someone who maybe doesn't, and share it with empathy and grace, because I genuinely believe that the majority of people just don't know, or something, they just don't know, and you don't know what you don't know. So if you have someone in your life that maybe takes it a little too seriously, or doesn't understand or understand some of the behind the scenes work, educate them, send them to UCAN Foundation, the various podcasts, mine included here, and just watch these things and show people some grace. And then lastly, when there's an opportunity for you to say something mean through DM or online, or write something mean, or even in person, say something. I always, again, dad of the internet, tell people, stop for a second and ask myself, is this really about them, or is this something going on with me? And you're
Mm-hmm.
going to find that it's always something going on with you.
Right.
So if you can do that introspective work, I think you'll find a lot more peace, and then you'll maybe not say something that would impact and hurt somebody else. But fight with us, join with us, educate people, spread the word. My favorite person that I met recently in the last couple months, actually it's longer now, I was walking home from the farmer's market last fall, and this woman stopped me and she said, I'm really grateful for the work you're doing with UCAN. You are changing the way that I view reality TV. Like, me and my girlfriend used to watch these shows and we would sit around and gossip about it. Now we watch these shows and we talk about what we think is really going on. And that's all because of the work that we've
Yes.
done with UCAN Foundation. So, like, maybe instead of gossiping about an unreal or not real, fiction-esque, unscripted show, maybe talk about what you could be seeing that's going on there. Maybe talk about the way that you would feel if you were edited this way, or you said this drunk thing, as you pointed out earlier, on TV, and talk about how that would make you feel. And maybe then you can sort of spread the word and normalize conversations that humanize these people instead of villainize them.
Yes. I love that. That's wonderful. I absolutely love that. What you just said, use it as almost a training, an exercise, if you will.
Yeah.
As you can even make it fun. Try to figure out, oh, did you see that cut there?
Yeah,
Make it
exactly.
fun, but also make it an empathy exercise.
Yeah,
I think that's a
exactly.
great idea.
Just don't make it a drinking game, because then you're going
No.
to be one of the drunk people saying something silly, because there's going to be
Right.
a lot of edits. Well, I want to thank you again for coming on my show to talk about your writing. I know that it's new and it's fresh, and you're very, very busy, and you're getting your doctorate degree and everything. So taking time today is greatly appreciated, and I appreciate the work you're doing. I have all of the links below, but where can people find your research, and where can people find you if they want to connect with you on LinkedIn or Instagram?
Yeah, thank you so much. So on Instagram, my username is Chrissy4Missy. Feel free to say hello. And then on LinkedIn, it's just my first and last name, Christine Chapais. I think it might show up as Christine C, as like a third party invitation, but feel free to say hello. And you can find my article. It's published through Psychology of Popular Media, which is an APA publication.
Great. And again, those links are below. So thank you so much. And I appreciate you spending time with me.
Thank you so much, Nick. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for joining us on this week's episode of Eyes Wide Open. If you enjoy the show, the best way to support us is by sharing or dropping a review. For more information and content, check out engagewithnick.com or find me on Instagram at nthompson513. Don't go through life blind. Do the work so you can show up in the world with your eyes wide open.